Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the webinar that focuses on the critical topic of policy and regulatory developments across emerging markets and whether they are driving change in the plastics sector. Today, we'll be discussing how key regulatory frameworks are evolving across the Middle East, Africa, and South Asia, particularly India, South Africa, and Middle East, and what this means for the plastics industry, governments, and civil society. I'm Solia. And I'm joined by some influential experts who are helping shape plastic policy on the ground. Here's what you can expect over the next hour: a dynamic panel discussion and a chance to engage with our speakers during the Q&A session. Before I introduce our panelists, I'd like to take a moment to give you a short background about the Plastics Recycling Show Middle East and Africa, organized by Crane Communications and Media Fusion. This webinar is part of our official pre-event activities designed to spark early dialogue and share insights ahead of the Plastics Recycling Show 2025. For those of you who may be new to this trade show, this is a unique event dedicated to plastics recycling in the Middle East and Africa and brings together key stakeholders from across the global value chain to learn, network, and explore new business opportunities in this sector. The third edition of the three-day exhibition and conference will take place from 15 to 17 September at Dubai World Trade Center. The international exhibition showcases an array of advanced solutions, from cutting-edge machinery and equipment to the latest recycling technologies and sustainable practices. As many countries in the Middle East increasingly invest in infrastructure to help manage plastic scrap effectively, the region presents great opportunities for growth and collaboration. We invite you to join us at the show this September. And for those looking to explore the opportunities it presents, in-depth information is available in the materials section of this platform. You can download the event brochure and other information during this program and review the same at your convenience. We have also introduced the Circular Plastics Hub, which offers companies a premium platform to display innovative products made from recycled plastic to a global audience during the exhibition. Now, moving on to the panel discussion, it is my pleasure to introduce our panelists, leading voices in the sustainability space with vast experience in policy, industry, and advocacy. We have with us Oliver Bonstein, General Manager, South African Plastics Recycling Organization; Rahul Nainani, Co-founder and CEO at Recircle India; Sebastian Frisch, Co-founder and Managing Partner at BlackForest Solutions, who will join us in a bit. I'm also pleased to introduce our moderator, Shailendra Singh, Founder and CEO of Sustain Mantra and Director General at APR Bharat. He has over 30 years of technical and commercial experience in chemicals, plastics, and packaging with leading global MNCs in the Asia Pacific region. He has also served as a board member in the Indian Institute of Packaging and Society of Plastic Engineers India, among others. As the founder and CEO of Sustain Mantra, his focus is on demystifying sustainability and enabling circular economy actions for the MSME sector. Over to Shailendra Singh.
Thank you very much, Swalia, and a warm welcome. A good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on which part of the globe you are joining us. Thank you for taking time out of your schedule to spend the next hour or so with us. And I hope to make this hour count and at least be a great learning experience. At the outset, I just wanted to make a couple of quick comments before I introduce our very experienced panel, who I believe will do full justice. Plastic waste and its management has occupied the center of the storm or the eye of the storm for the past decade. And as someone who's been tracking it, we can say that a lot of progress has been made. At the same time, say that a lot of progress has yet to be made. Different countries, as we speak today, starting this week, next week, there's going to be the UN Plastic Treaty negotiations, which is in its fifth year of negotiations, so to say. 180 countries, more than 180 countries, are trying to come up with a global plastic treaty. And as it happens, this has not been a very easy journey, because as we transition to a circular economy and sustainability, there are several aspects that come into play. In today's webinar, we are going to look at how this transition is going to take place, how is it taking place, and particularly with the lens on emerging markets and how regulations are either helping the transition, not helping, what are some of the gaps, etc., both at regulation as well as at policy level. So, with those very short comments, let me first introduce the panel, and I'd request all the panelists to please switch on their cameras so that the audience can see them. Um, I'm not sure, has Sebastian joined us earlier? Okay,
Yeah,
so
he's
let
just
me
about to
start with
join. He's just joining. Yeah, he'll join in 2
super.
minutes.
So,
Yeah.
okay, so thanks for that. So let me first introduce Mr. Oliver Bonstein. Oliver is the general manager of the South African Plastics Recycling Organization, short form SAPRO, as you see in his background. And he's while studying economics and environmental studies at the University of Cape Town, Oliver was involved in setting up recyclable collection initiatives around the campus and residences. After graduating, he started a curbside recyclables collection business. From there, Oliver spent 5 years as a waste management planning consultant and 8 years in a circular economy think tank doing industrial symbiosis and African plastics pact facilitation. He has been the general manager of SAPRO for 2 years now. Welcome, Oliver, and look forward to your thoughts on this subject. Um, Next, I'd like to introduce Rahul Nani. Rahul Nani is the co-founder and CEO of Recircle, a pioneering clean tech organization which is on a mission to drive the circular economy. He is a distinguished alumnus of the CFA program and excels in strategy, branding, business development, finance, and fundraising. He has forged long term collaborations with industry giants such as Unilever, UNDP India, Coca Cola Beverages, Mondelez, Tata, and so on, um, aiding them in accomplishing their sustainability objectives. As an innovative leader, Rahul prioritizes sustainable growth, creating mutually beneficial outcomes for employees, partners, clients, and society as a whole. A purpose fueled by passion and profit mindset enables Rahul to function as a social entrepreneur with proactive hands on style leadership, and his energy is contagious, which I presume you will see in the next coming hour. His accomplishments have garnered him numerous accolades, including the Fortune 40 Under 40, the Business World Social Impact Leader in Recycling in the year 2022, Entrepreneur India's Best Social Impact Startup in 2022, and the Young Achievers Award of 2021, and the Tata Social Sciences Enterprise of the Year in 2021. When he's not in office, you'll probably find him at high profile conferences and at the New York Times Climate Change Conference, or he's probably scuba diving somewhere in our oceans. Welcome, Rahul. Last but not the least is Sebastian. Sebastian, welcome. And it's my pleasure to introduce Sebastian Frisch, who is the co founder and managing partner of BlackForest Solutions. Um, he has more than 20 years of waste management experience in 60 plus countries, with 12 years of practical experience in EPR for solid waste management and the circular economy sector. He has again more than 10 years of regional experience in carrying out projects in low and middle income countries. In one of the projects was also he was also able to provide sustainable design solutions for a packaging company in Myanmar, Laos, and Cambodia. As the exclusive technical consultant to Grameen Creative Labs and the Alliance to End Plastic Waste, he's been responsible for conducting a technical and financial analysis for the plastic recycling process and multi stakeholder discussions for social business based facilities in Vietnam and India. He was also involved in the assessment of PET recycling facility that receives input from multicolored bins in Hong Kong. On behalf of the German Ministry of Environment, Frisch has conducted various country level studies on the circular economy and EPR sector. It's a long, long list, and if I keep introducing Sebastian's achievements, we'll probably run out of the hour. But suffice it to say that he's probably got the widest experience across different economies and is certainly relevant for our topic of discussion today. With that introduction and thanks for the patience, Alia, may I request you to first start the first poll so that we can get a sense of what the audience is thinking and what their thoughts are. And as the poll runs, I'd ask all the audience members to kindly put in your votes so that we get a sense of where the thought process is today. So let's just give a couple of minutes for the audience to vote. The numbers are changing dramatically, huh? Alia, do let me know when a couple of minutes have passed by so that we can freeze the poll.
Yes, the poll has closed now.
Super. So as it seems, about 50%. So we got a split right down the middle, I guess. 50% of the audience thinks that it's significantly helping or somewhat helping. 27% is neutral, or they don't want to comment. And about 20% feel that the regulations are actually hindering progress. So that's for the panelists' benefit is where the mindset of the audience is today. And hopefully, over the discussions we have in the next 40 minutes, 45 minutes, we'll be able to convince the audience one way or the other. And let's see how that goes. With that, let me throw a question to all the panelists. And they can, and starting with you, Oliver, followed by Sebastian and then Rahul. The question I wanted to ask is, with your experience, this is a high level question. We are making broad brush marks here. So I'd like you to focus on the higher things. How aligned are the evolving regulations with broader circular economy goals? And where do you see the biggest gaps between policy intention and policy implementation? Over to you, Oliver, if you can give your comment, followed by Sebastian and then Rahul.
Thanks, Alindra, and hello, everybody. I think when it came to that poll, I would have voted that it is helping. I think in South Africa, we've definitely seen a positive impact from having EPR regulations in place. Giving a little bit of grace for the fact that it's new and we're trying it out and it's not perfect, there's definitely been a positive growth in the recycling rate. But your question is really about the gaps. So it's currently in its first set of amendments. So they amended it just before implementation, and now it's having, I think we're at year 4 and we're having amendments again. But as a tool, it's really had a really good impact in terms of setting targets for circular economy principles that we want to achieve in South Africa. Things that are currently a little bit out of kilter, I would say, are things like missing a little bit of directive in design for recycling. So in South Africa, we have an implied design for recycling requirement. So there's a requirement for environmental labeling, which could be equated to on-packaging recycling labeling. And with that, you would require things like a definition for recyclable. But the South African legislation doesn't explicitly define recyclable. It uses an ISO definition. And the problem with the ISO definition is that it's really vague. And so you get differences in interpretation by like the producer sector versus the recycler sector. The producers would lean towards more lenient or a lower standard for things like design for recycling, where the recyclers, who should, in my view, be the litmus test for if something is recyclable or not, they would lean towards a higher standard in design for recycling and definitions for recyclable. So it's creating a little bit of tension, or just maybe focusing in on existing tensions. Other things that I think fall into the gap is that the EPR regulations created recycling targets for the different material streams. And in setting these targets, they try to level the playing field by creating differentiated targets based off of the existing recycling rate. So materials which have historically performed very badly in the recycling industry have been given very lenient targets. With obviously the intention was to give them something realistic to aim towards. But what it's actually achieved is it's given the upper hand to the historically poorly recycled materials. And from the recycler's standpoint, those are problematic materials. Those are materials that they don't want. They don't have end markets to go into. So actually those materials should be paying a premium on their EPR fees. But because of the lower targets, you're seeing actually lower EPR fees for the problematic materials, and higher EPR fees for the easily recycled materials. So I think I'm just going to go with those two for now and pass to the next.
Okay, that's good, Oliver. I mean, I heard, when we talk about circular economy, it would be things like design for recycling, etc. And that seems to be a common pain point across many countries. Of course, in emerging markets, people also talk about reduced consumption or responsible consumption, and that's a difficult one to achieve. And of late, there's also been a lot of discussion on reusables. And there have been some studies published in England that say that if reusables come into play, that could very significantly impact waste generation to begin with. But thank you for your insights, Oliver. Let me move to Sebastian and the same question around, do you see the regulations aligning with the broader circular economy and sustainability goals? If so, and if not, where are the gaps?
Yeah, thank you, Shalendra, for the question. So I think that the regulations and the environmental policies are the trigger actually to achieve the circular economy targets and goals. So this is the main condition to be able to achieve the different goals of different countries. And when I look at my own country, so Germany, we have started to implement the most important waste management environmental policy, in my opinion, and it was mentioned already, extended producer responsibility, back in 1991. So we have now more than 30 years of experience with EPR. And I would say that because of EPR, Germany has achieved some significant circular economy targets and goals. And one of the most important target, in my opinion, is the closure of landfills and dump sites for untreated waste. And this has been managed back in 2005. So in Germany, not a single kilogram of municipal solid waste is being dumped since 2005 without treatment. Of course, you will always have landfills, unfortunately, but those landfills are for ashes, for slag, drosses, for inert material. It was possible because of EPR to divert the waste from landfills in Germany and to close it and to go only into energy recovery or recycling. And we have achieved a circular economy in the sense of that there's a true economy now with a turnover, an official figure is somewhere between 80 to 90 billion euros of companies being involved in waste management and circular economy. 100,000 of qualified jobs have been created. And the trigger again was, this is my my thesis, I mean, to be proven, but there's a clear indication that EPR is linked with all these successes and all these achievements. And I think what we are observing now is in the mid of the 20s now that worldwide EPR systems are being implemented, and that this success story is not just only a European success story, but has the potential now to become a global success story. And we hope and we work every day that EPR systems can be implemented worldwide. To the second part of your question, Shalendra, what are the problems of the implementation? There are a couple of problems and a couple of challenges. One is when you look at the PROs, the implementation units of EPR, the producer responsibility organizations, those are key in an EPR system. If the PRO is not efficient, if it's not professional, if it's not transparent, then EPR systems have a high risk to fail. So it needs transparency and it needs a professional setup of the PRO. Then second risk is that you need to have a proper infrastructure to be developed in the countries, meaning a collection scheme, treatment facilities. EPR should and is also triggering foreign direct investment. And we need those investments in waste management to offer the capacity and the capability to treat the waste. Otherwise, you just have regulations, but then no proper infrastructure that follows those regulations. And the third major challenge, Shalendra, is that I think that the regulations should be precise, should be concrete in each country. Sometimes you have the challenge that the regulations are somehow there, but still a bit blurry. And we need clear targets, as Oliver was saying. We need clear definitions, and this is sometimes a lack in different countries. And because of this ambiguity, it's sometimes difficult to implement an EPR system.
That's really nice. I agree, Sebastian. When I was in Ottawa last year, I think I would be would be correct in saying that many countries were very curious about EPRs. To your point that it's now being worldwide implementation, there were a lot of questions. Countries which are not implementing it were keen to implement, and so on. So I see some point there on the infrastructure being developed. Recently, I read that UK has collected a significant amount of sum from the EPR schemes, and that's going to be invested in building infrastructure. So, thank you for your perspective there, Sebastian. Rahul, same question to you. Are the regulations helping or taking away from circular economy, and where are the gaps?
Yeah, thanks, Shaileन्द्ra, for that question. So I think to start with, I feel that based on the poll, I would say that they are somewhat helping. I don't think that they are fully right there, specifically with the focus of India and from the Indian context itself. And we lie somewhat in between. I think what Oliver mentioned that about 4 to 5 years since South Africa has their EPR, and Sebastian mentioned Germany is almost 30 years or so. So India is somewhere in the middle. So we have some common gaps that I could resonate with the other speakers as well. So India has had our EPR regulation since almost 10 years. So the first draft that came out was in 2016. And coincidentally, that when we launched Recircle, it was around the same period of time. So we actually saw the entire evolution of the policy that came along and how that created an impact in the market. And that being said, I think before the EPR regulation came into the country, I think circular economy or sustainability was not even spoken about. So at least now it's become a big conversation, and plastic pollution, with India being recognized as the second largest plastic polluter in the world, has become the center stage of conversation. So I think with the policy coming in, there's definitely been a lot of tailwind in the sector towards circular economy, right from having offset targets, which is what the initial policy focused on, and then we've gone through a fair share of amendments over the last 7 to 8 years to keep refining it year on year. There's still challenges in terms of implementation, but I think prior to the policy, there was no targets, and at least now there are some clear targets in terms of offsets, and from this financial year also in terms of use of recycled content. And there's some reuse targets as well. So I think that overall, over the last 6 to 7 years, I think there has definitely been a movement towards circular economy that's come in because of the policy, and specifically with regards to EPR, as well as our Prime Minister's Clean India or the Swachh Bharat movement that has added in a little bit more tailwind into the sector in terms of waste as a whole, and then plastic waste within that. And we've actually seen the Indian policy evolve from plastics to going into used oil to tire waste. There's batteries, there's electronics, so multiple EPRs that have come in, and a couple more that are in the pipeline. So overall, I believe that yes, there has been a lot of traction towards making an industry out of plastic within the country itself. But that being said, I think it has its fair share of gaps, and some of the points might be some that I resonate with the other speakers as well. So I think while there are targets, but I don't think that there is clarity in terms of definitions. There's clarity in terms of implementation. I think that's the bigger gap. I feel like while targets have been laid out by the authorities, but how to go about implementing them is still a gray area, which is supposed to be found, which is expected that the companies will figure it out themselves. Whereas the clarity in terms of how to implement doesn't exist. Secondly, I think over the years, while the initial policies had a role of the informal sector, and specifically like a country like India, where almost 70-80% of our waste gets managed by the informal waste ecosystem, the current policy does not include the role of informal waste workers as a part of the entire supply chain. It's more towards recycling and using recycled content, but the entire grassroots level of where the actual work happens has been not accounted for in the drafts itself. Um, Secondly, I would say the one is the role of the informal sector, which is lacking. The second is in terms of the infrastructure. So again, targets have been made and put into place, but without actually having the relevant infrastructure, the relevant funding in the ecosystem that is required to actually meet those targets. So, why my thought, at least what I feel, is that over the next few years, you'll see that a lot of the companies are not able to meet their targets that they have set out, largely not because of the intention or the policy not being in place, but more from the point that there is not enough infrastructure available to meet those targets, specifically on the recycled content usage and moving towards more circular packaging aspect of things. And then finally, I feel that one of the things that is missing very, very at the core of the essence is that the design aspect of packaging itself is not been spoken about anywhere in the policy. So while we are introducing recycled content, we are getting offset targets, we have reuse targets, but in terms of design for recycling, design for circular economy, and standardizing packaging to a level which makes it easier to ensure it gets collected and it gets recycled is something that is a major hole that is missing in that entire ecosystem. So yeah, I mean, while India has had a fair share of development in the policy, but there are still some gaps that I believe that can be plugged in to ensure that the implementation can be done more concretely, and as well as to see the real impact on the ground.
Great. Thanks for that, Rahul. And from what you said and what Sebastian said about keeping it specific, and I think Oliver said the same thing, it reminds me of my own interaction with one of the government officials. I won't say which country. What he said was, hey, listen, we are building the bike and we are trying to ride it at the same time. So we'll make some mistakes, but as we make the mistakes, we will learn and we'll make amendments. So you see South Africa talking about amendments. India has its own share of amendments since 2016. Um, just to close this subject on circular economy, I think where this is my personal opinion, I think you start with the broader objectives. One of the things about circular economy is, and I find this lacking in many countries, there's also a bone of contention in the UN plastic treaty is, with all this recycling and so on that we are doing, is it leading to any significant reduction in resource extraction? a very big point, because are we going to use less of fossil fuel with whatever we are doing now? So at a high level, there are some gaps, and sometimes I say that EPR is a good instrument. It should be implemented, but sometimes it's like the tail wagging the dog. But that is a matter of discussion for another chapter. Let me go back to Oliver and then ask you, Oliver, in this scenario, as regulations evolve, things are not very clear, crystal clear, at least as far as regulations are concerned. What are some of the challenges that you face while working with clients, particularly in emerging markets? You're on mute,
Are
Oliver.
you, sorry about that. Are you
Yeah.
talking more broadly in terms of complying with the EPR regulations?
Yeah, and yeah, EPR, and if there is associated plastic waste regulations, are there
Yeah.
any challenges when you work with clients? Because if the regulation is not clear, it's difficult for people to know, what are they doing, why are they doing it, what is the permanency of those actions that they have to take.
Yeah. If we're going just beyond the EPR regulations, there's definitely
Yeah,
some compliance challenges on environmental regulations to recycling companies. So in South Africa, you have to have a waste management license to be a recycler. And there's various exemptions, but basically that is a constraint that forces them to comply with environmental regulations and standards. But it
right,
seems that, but I think I must bring it back to EPR. But just on
right,
that, it seems that the problem with government is not that they have bad regulations. The regulations, it's great that they are there and they can be improved. The problem really is on the enforcement side. For South African governments, uh, enforcing regulations and laws is very tough. So what we've seen is a little bit of an overextension on enforcing environmental regulations. And so the government is starting to crack down on recycling companies in terms of minor infringements on the environmental regulations, which actually threatens their existence to continue. I'm not saying that it's wrong to have those regulations or to enforce the regulations, but it must be done in a way that protects the companies and actually enables them to comply. So that's the one thing. But actually, what I think is really interesting is the EPR regulations, because EPR regulations create tension between different parts of the economy that actually do need each other. Um,
yeah,
so what I mean by that is the EPR regulations created targets for collection rates and recycling rates for the different materials. The incentive from the manufacturers and the producers is to try and get as much of their material into the recycling rate, into the recycling stream. And this is happening because of false claims of recyclability being made. So a brand might claim that their packaging is recyclable so that it could get into the recycling stream, only for it to be rejected at the recycling plant, and also to have created additional unnecessary logistics and handling costs. And then the disposal cost is taken at the expense of the recycler. So that's a little bit of an inequality in the results of EPR. And we're also finding that, like what Rahul said earlier, that a lot of the brands are struggling to meet their EPR targets for recycled content inclusion. And I'm not really sure what's happening there. It seems that if you don't meet your targets for recycled content inclusion, you would pay a fine. But because of lack of enforcement, it seems that they're probably not paying those fines. And so, yeah, that basically leaves a paucity in the demand for recycled plastics, and that has a knock-on effect. We also have a problem with local capacity to verify PCR content. I know that if we want to export packaging and products to Europe, they require recycled content which is verified, but our National Bureau of Standards doesn't actually have the ability to verify that, which puts us at a bit of a back foot. Um, yeah, and I've mentioned the false claims of recyclability as well. So I think I'll leave it there as well.
Okay. Thanks, Oliver. Sebastian, you probably have had the widest experience of working with clients across different economies and with the evolving regulations. Are there any challenges that you have seen that you would like to highlight?
The challenges in the regulations. I think this was described by Oliver quite well now, and it's a repetition in many markets that we see. And as I also mentioned, before Germany has achieved, um, thanks to EPR, quite a few circular economy and waste management targets, but it also took a significant amount of time, right? So we have to be a bit patient also when it comes to EPR. This is not just a switch that you can press and then the next morning you wake up and waste management works. It's really
Yeah.
a process. Also, the regulations are likely to be amended very frequently. We see this in India as well. There are very frequent updates, and this is also needed. But I think from a client perspective, to answer your questions, the producers and importers and brand owners, they need clarity. They need clarity, they need transparency, and they need a level playing field. All this was mentioned by Rahul and by Oliver, and I can just fully confirm and agree here. When this is there, then we don't see a lot of hesitance from the producers and importers. They are willing, they're even eager to take responsibility, but only if it's clear for what and how the money is being spent. That's why I, by the way, also prefer this classic EPR model much more than, for example, plastic credits. Yeah, plastic credits are often being used as a term and as a concept, but my opinion is that plastic credits are sometimes not clear, right? So you don't know exactly what is happening with the budget of plastic credits, and what are then the rules applying for it. Whereas in an EPR system, you have ideally a clear regulation by the government, even ideally again then enforced. But so in a context like this, clients are increasingly open to participate in an EPR system. This is also a development I would say that is very positive in the last 10 years. I would say 10 years, 15 years ago, you wouldn't find this openness from the clients, but this is also about to change worldwide.
Right. And Sebastian, in the case of Europe, EPR itself went through sort of the old EPR, then eco-modulated EPR, and now there's a plastic tax. And to your point that it took a long time, and EPR takes long time, and you said one needs to have patience. Was the introduction of the plastic tax sort of the motivator to push people along, or how do you see that, Sebastian?
Yeah, normally when we start speaking about EPR, one of our first sentences is to say that EPR is not a tax. Yeah, EPR is a service fee, because a
Right,
tax could be used in theory for everything, right? So there's a tax, and then
right,
for what it is being spent is a different question.
right,
Whereas EPR has another advantage, it is earmarked, this tailor-made for a specific purpose, isn't it? That's why we call it rather a service fee that is being paid. Um, some have the position that also a plastic tax could be a form of EPR, so it can go hand in hand and it can coexist, but you see risks because um, clients, producers, importers, brand owners, they could claim, well, why we should pay double, so to say. We pay a plastic
right,
tax, and then at the same time, why we should pay on top also our EPR service fees. And we have currently in Kenya, for example, such a court case where the producers and importers also claim exactly this. Yeah, so that there's a double payment, and they went to court, and currently the EPR regulations are kind of on hold because of this.
Oh,
So it can lead to confusion, to
yeah.
ambiguity, and this is better to be avoided. You have similar tendencies in other African countries
Yeah.
that I'm aware of. So we would rather recommend on an EPR service fee rather than a tax.
Okay. Thanks for that. And as I turn to Rahul with the same questions, Alia, this is probably a good time to run the poll. But Rahul, you talked about India and how policies are evolving. There are some gaps on implementation side. So when you work with clients, what are the challenges that you face in India?
No, I think Shailendraji, I quite resonate with a lot of the things that Oliver and Sebastian mentioned. I think to start with is clarity on the ask. I think that's one thing that the rules are right now sometimes not as clear, and I think that it's open to interpretation. So I think we having it very crystal clear is
Hmm.
something where brands are making their own interpretations out of it and then working out ways to actually, implement it. Not repeating the other points that the previous panelists have already made, but I think one of the other areas that I feel that there is a challenge in terms of implementation is more operational, that the tools that the pollution control board have made are quite often not functional. The portals, the changes in the systems, identifying verified recyclers for the credits. I think that's another gray area. There have been cases in India where fake credits being issued as well. So a proper diligence in terms of who to work with, how to work with, as well. While the larger MNCs and clients want traceability, but the policy does not put as much emphasis on traceability to ensure that credits are being verified from the collection to the final recycling end. And now with the use of recycled content, it's going to become more and more important. So I think that's another area. And finally, if I had to conclude, is that while the big brands, which are the large ones that have the capacity to actually maneuver through these compliances and understand the legal language around it, are still able to find ways to implement it and make sure that they are compliant with the policies. But a lot of the mid-size and the small-size brands or the producers or the brand owners are the ones that probably do not understand the policy very well, do not have the bandwidth to actually go out there and take extensive steps in terms of licensing with the government or with in terms of implementing it. So we've often seen that the mid-size and small-size brands stay behind in this race, while they have the intention to do so, but do not have the bandwidth or the required resources to actually work towards implementing these policies directly. And there I see that there's a lot of gap in terms of actually ensuring that they are able to find a nice proper way to actually implement this. So I think that the bandwidth issues with the smaller brands where they do not have the required compliance requirement in terms of well, they have the compliance requirement and the intent, but they're not able to implement as they do not have the bandwidth to do so.
Yeah. No, those are great points, Rahul. One question that comes to mind as I listen to you, Oliver, and possibly Sebastian's experience is do the implementers themselves understand the plastic rules? I mean, why I say this is with no disrespect to the officials, but it's a relatively new subject, right? It's only about 10 years, and plastics is a whole different world. Do you think there's a lack of understanding at the point of implementation that further leads to confusion? Is that your sense, Rahul, or not?
Yeah, I think while the intention of the policymakers has always been right in terms of increasing recycled content, putting the responsibility on the producers, importers, brand owners for the waste that they're putting out. But often what we understand is that, and I say this with a caveat that India is a large country, and the
Yeah.
ecosystem across the country, every state, every geography is quite different. Uh, Often these rules get lost in terms of translation, in terms of implementing it on the ground. So while the intention is right, but maybe that ground level understanding how the ecosystem works and how to incorporate that as a part of the solution is sometimes lacking. And this is, I think, what I said last earlier as well, is that while 70 to 80% of the recycling efforts in our country happen through the informal sector, but there is no incentive, there is no subsidy,
Yeah.
there's inclusion of the informal sector in our rules as well.
Right. 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 So thanks for that, Rahul. Alia, could you play back the poll results just for a small time? I thought I saw a predominant favor of mandating recycled content targets as the preferred implementation. The second poll, Alia. Okay. Um, okay, as Alia puts that, let me start. Let's move gears a little bit and let's talk. And Rahul, you brought this point up, so I'm going to start with you this time. Um, how have these evolving regulations in India, particularly EPR and PWM, shaped recircle strategy, particularly in the context of integrating informal waste collectors into the formal value chain?
So thanks, Shailenaji, for that question. So at the core of when we started Recircle almost 9 years ago, I think one of the main things that we did want to work on is to create an inclusive business model. So today, as we work with the large FMCGs on their EPR and like PWM compliance, we have a network of more than 300 collection partners that we work in more than 250 geographies across the country. We work with 45 waste processors, and through the impact funds that we've received from the likes of GSMA, from UNDP India, and through other larger organizations like Alliance to End Plastic Waste, we have constantly worked on formalizing and bringing the informal sector as a part of our supply chain. Now, while the policy does not mandate to do so, but at our own recircle strategy level, we believe that the efficiencies, the know-how and the expertise that the informal sector have in our country is unparalleled. Like if we had to go out there and replace that with formal infrastructures of us doing the work, I don't think that we would do justice to it. And I personally believe that the informal sector deserves the
Hmm.
recognition and dignity for the work that they have been doing behind the scenes for decades now. As we have scaled and grown, we've kept the entire supply chain at the core of our work and worked towards creating an inclusive supply chain that has not only helped us actually scale up quite fast. So to give context, we recovered over 120,000 tons of plastic waste on behalf of brands just in the last financial year. And this has been possible only because of the partnerships that we have with the formal and informal waste collection ecosystem that's part of our supply chain. And we do intend to scale up our operations with their support, as we believe that they are going to be a key role in terms of managing waste in our country going forward.
Right, right. And also, the concept of just transition is also a big tenet of the UN Plastic Treaty, and there's a lot of discussion going on around that subject. So I hope that through the UN Plastic Treaty, some of these aspects would be covered. But you're right. In India, without the informal waste system being integrated, is going to be difficult. Moving to you, Sebastian, to the business side of things. How are these evolving regulations shaping the business models of waste management and recycling companies, in your opinion?
Well, they enable business models, and they help to be more profitable with, for example, a business model that implies plastic recycling, because simply there is more budget in the whole system. I mean, that's the reason for the entire exercise, that the budgets are being collected from the producers and importers, and then spent on proper collection and proper treatment of, for example, plastic packaging waste. However, right, so what a regulation cannot achieve is that it will always maintain a market that is under all circumstances profitable. So regulations are detached from the economic market, so to say. In other words, it does not mean when you have an EPR system, they are not the normal market dynamics and market mechanisms. So if you look at the media at the moment, you see a couple of press releases, especially in the last few days, of recycling companies that are suffering a very tough, or that are facing a very tough economic situation. We have seen that larger plastic recycling companies in the UK, they needed to shut down their operations. And in the UK, you have a EPR system, and the same applies for other plastic recycling companies in Germany, Africa. I'm based here in the Middle East, in Abu Dhabi at the moment, and we see that larger plastic recycling projects were postponed, for example. So regulations can enable profitable and good business models. I would say without EPR, it's very difficult to achieve this. But at the same time, we need to limit a bit the expectations, yeah, and manage the expectations. And market dynamics still apply. And this is a complete different perspective then.
Understand. And I noticed, gentlemen, that we're about 7 minutes to the hour. Let me move to Oliver and just to take 15 seconds. In the previous session, it seemed like mandatory recycled content in EPR was predominantly favored, at least as part of the poll that we conducted to the audience. So that's clearly where the mindset of the audience is. To you, Oliver, how have these regulations and evolving regulations, particularly EPR, changed the way that recyclers and converters operate in practice?
Thanks very much. Yeah. Well, it's definitely having a big impact. So over the last 4 years, while we've had EPR in place, the recycling rate for plastics has gone up. I say that with caution. It hasn't gone up as much as one would have liked, but it has gone up. And I think what's significant here is that it's done that despite growing pressure on the recycling industry. So the cost of energy and labor has gone up a lot in South Africa. And this is happening at the same time as the price of virgin plastics going down. So the financial pressure on the recycling industry has been significant. But that being said, recyclers have closed down, so you would expect the recycling rate to be dropped. But because of the expectations associated with EPR regulations, there have been significant investments into new recycling capacity. And so the recycling capacity has grown up, has expanded. I think that a lot of the companies that invested in recycling capacity had a bigger expectation for the demand for recycled content. And so I would also have voted in that poll that mandatory PCR content would have been the primary driver for successful growth in the circular economy. And because of fluctuating prices and competition from virgin plastics, you're finding that the converters are missing their targets, their PCR targets, at the risk of whatever fines it is, but actually with the perception that they're still better off for using virgin polymers. So I think it's good. Then I would like to say that there has been quite a lot of change in the industry. So, for example, there's been interest from long-standing converters of films for in problematic materials like PVC, showing interest in converting their infrastructure capacity to manufacturing a more EPR-friendly polyolefin film, for example. that those changes haven't necessarily been made, but there's been a lot of interest. There's also been a lot of pressure from the brands towards the manufacturers. So, for example, label manufacturers are getting a lot of requests for recycled content, recycling friendly or recyclable labels. So recycling friendly basically just means easily wash offable labels or recyclable labels. There's equally pressure being put onto the manufacturers of packaging as a whole to have recycled content or to be recyclable. And I won't speak to some of the pitfalls with that, but there's definitely been some behavior change. So yeah, looking pretty good. I have mentioned about how the recycling rate is gradually going up despite quite a lot of downward pressure.
Right.
So yeah, I think those are the main things I'd like to point out.
Right. Right. Thanks for that, Oliver. I think also Sebastian referred to it that the regulations and sometimes the real market economy seem to be detached, and what you see is possibly those pressures playing out, and all we can hope is that it will all level out at some point, and then that recycling will take off. Let me start this round of questions with you again, Oliver. At the beginning, you talked about the policy implementation gaps and so on. Can you, for the benefit of our audience, also tell us how SAPRO is addressing some of these gaps in the policy intent and implementation?
Absolutely. I think one of our biggest bugbears at the moment is design for recycling. So we see quite a lot of badly designed packaging entering the recycling stream, which is a liability for anybody who has to manage it. So we developed a design for recycling guideline that makes it very easy to understand and to produce packaging which is acceptable to the current recycling industry. That also includes OPRLs, so we provide like an OPRL alignment. We're finding that the virgin producers and the packaging producing industry does not align with us in terms of the standards that we want to uphold when it comes to recyclability. So there's a bit of a tension there about where do we draw the line and who gets to decide if something is recyclable or not. We have taken a slightly higher standard approach just because anything that's badly designed has a negative value for the recycling industry, so that it has to be paid to be disposed. We've gone quite in depth with our opposite number in the virgin polymers industry to try and find middle ground, and we've written an extensive position paper which is hopefully going to inform the amendments to the regulations on how to decide if something is recyclable or not. But essentially it points out that the packaging producers can't just label something as recyclable and then expect the recycling industry to deal with it. Rather, they should be consulting the recycling industry and then letting the recycling industry tell them if it's recyclable or not. And so, yeah, we've done a lot of work in that space. Yeah.
Right. So what essentially SAPO is doing is building some sort of a consensus in the plastic packaging value chain based on dialogues and collaborations, and then working with the ministry to make sure that some of that gets reflected in the regulations, and that's how you would
Perfect.
am I describing it correctly?
That's exactly how I would summarize it. Yes, I think there are
Super.
slow moving pieces, and it could be a bit of an oversimplification to assume that everybody will align. So I think there is a need for quite a lot of compromise and debate. But ultimately, what you've summarized is what we're hoping for.
Super, super. Thanks so much, Oliver. Let me move to Sebastian. And Sebastian, for you, what are the key objectives in UAE to achieve with the introduction of the EPR legislation? And how do you see this framework evolving in the Emirates in the coming year? Is Sebastian with us or have we lost him?
No, I had just had some internet problems, but now I'm back. And
Okay.
I got your question, Shalendra. Yeah, so
Yeah.
here in the UAE, we are working now since 2 years actually on the implementation of an EPR concept. This is a mandate from the Ministry of Climate Change and Environment, and together with the ministry, we are now at the phase where we are going into a pilot in the UAE. So the operational phase of this pilot is about to start now. And what the UAE is doing, first of all, they really managed to take their time to develop the regulations and to have a very intense stakeholder involvement. So it's a very integrative approach that all the stakeholders are involved from the beginning and during the whole development of this EPR concept. I think that's also one lesson learned. So if not all the
Yeah.
stakeholders, all the relevant stakeholders are involved, then an EPR
Yeah.
system cannot properly work. Yeah, you need this in cooperation with everyone and
Yeah.
get their expert feedback. And this is where we are at the moment. And this is for the whole GCC region, I think, a bit of a benchmark, if I may say. And the UAE, I think, is up for an implementation soon. I'm not in a position to give any exact deadlines at the moment, but I can just see that we are on track with what was the plan. Yeah, and the UAE is not only looking for an EPR system for plastic packaging, but literally for all packaging and batteries and e-waste, and that's the current status that we have here.
Super. Super. It seems like UAE is taking the right approach. It's trying to learn from mistakes that others have made. And I wish you and your team the best. And of course, the Emirates a good success in this. Alia, this would be a good time to run the third poll. And as I move to Rahul and ask him the very important question that we touched on, but did not really cover in detail. Rahul, what role can data transparency play in helping regulators and brands verify compliance with EPR mandates, especially in countries where enforcement capacity is limited?
I think it's a very important fact because I think when we were initially working in the space and we were trying to look for data of waste being produced, I think different data sets gave us different data points in terms of how much waste is being produced, how much is being collected, how much is being recycled. And I think that at the
Mhm.
grasp of all of this is that if you can't track it, how do you make sure are you able to make it better in terms of creating a plan of action or in terms of implementation itself? And I believe that I think traceability in the waste supply chain, which is largely informal, is a key component, which will not only help the brands that are implementing this actually showcase it at a global level along with the SDGs and ESG reporting, and not just limited to EPR. It also gives compliance verification to the authorities where they are able to actually track and trace where it's happening, because in reality the authorities in India, at least, while they've created a very robust ecosystem for implementation and robust way to actually get registered and get your targets in place, but monitoring that is actually happening and tracking and auditing that uh, the data that is being submitted is actually accurate is something that there seems to still be a lack of and we've seen this in the past of multiple challenges with credits that have been issued, which are not, which have been fake or which have not had the right documentation. So I think traceability from the point of the credits, and more so, more importantly, from the point of using recycled content in food grade material is going to be a key aspect in terms of providing the data traceability. One is on the implementation, the second is in terms of understanding the baseline as well, because today different sources give different numbers, and until we're not able to actually drill down in terms of tracking what is being generated, what is being collected, how do you
Right.
actually go out there and make a plan of action in terms of implementing it as well. So yeah, I feel that we've not even scratched the surface in terms of data and reporting in India at least, but there's a long way to go ahead over there.
Got it. Got it. Thanks. And I agree with you, Rahul. I think that's the key at making sure that we are, anything that you can't measure accurately, you can't improve. So if you're not measuring it, we're not reporting on it, how do we expect these things to improve? So thanks so much for that, Rahul. I think we have run a few minutes over the hour. I'm conscious that I'd like to allow the audience to also ask their questions because we have such an eminent panelist forum with us. But if you look at the poll results, I think predominant position is that lack of regulatory enforcement followed by inadequate infrastructure. That combined is about 63% of what the audience thinks is the biggest barrier for scaling plastic recycling in their regions. And so that's significant. It also, I think, runs with the views that our panelists had expressed at various points of time. So, with that, I just want to open the floor for questions that have come from the audience. And Alia, if you can help me with that, I'd be happy. So, have we had any questions, Alia?
Yes, Shailendraji, I'm just marking those to you.
Will that come to me in the chat box, right? Oh, sorry.
Yes.
Okay, I got it. So how are the question from the audience is, and anyone in the panel can take it, how are EPR and the circular economy truly connecting with people today when many sustainability initiatives are widely promoted across various platforms, yet in reality, people often pledge support but fail to follow through with real action. Can you provide a sample to reflect this gap? And let me paraphrase this. I hope the person who asked this question, when you use the word people today, do you mean people as in the average citizen, or do you mean companies and producers and importers um, uh, generally? I'm not sure, but if, does anyone want to take that question? Feel free. Um, Let me repeat, it's a rather long question. How is EPR and circular economy truly connecting with people today when many sustainability initiatives are widely promoted across various platforms? Yet, in reality, people pledge support but fail to follow through with real action. So I think the question here is more about there's a lot of talking going on. What's the action really on the ground? That's sort of paraphrasing the question heavily. But in your experience, um, anyone wants to take that question?
I think I'll try and take a shot at it,
Sure.
Shailendraji. So I think while if there's action happening or not happening on the ground, I think the co-panelists have given enough instances over the last hour. But in terms of people's participation, I think we're far from it. I think the rules are not even clear from the brand's point of view, and there's a lot of greenwashing or miscommunication that brands often do to their consumers to make their products feel more sustainable. But like Oliver was mentioning, that a lot of the brands mention that their products are recyclable, but in reality, when it goes down the supply chain, they are most likely not. So I keep repeating this often. I feel that it needs more awareness within the consumers itself, and simple things like well, if, is this packaging relevant? Why do you need it? If it could be in a different form, why not? And ask the right questions to the product or the brands that you are consuming. And if you're able to, if we as consumers or citizens ask the right question, I feel that the policy, of course, is a market maker and is going to be a mover to get companies to start implementing and taking action towards circular economy. But at the end of it, if we as consumers stop using a product or start asking the right questions, I feel that we have a lot more power than the policy itself, because at the end of it, we decide with our money in terms of who we are supporting and who we are not, and what products we're buying and what we're not. So it boils down to that. But yeah, that's 2 cents from my end. I think Oliver has something to add.
Yeah, please go ahead, Oliver, if you have something to add. Or
Thanks,
and
Rahul.
Sebastian. Though we can't see you, Sebastian, we can hear you. Yeah,
Yeah,
please go ahead, Oliver.
I'll give my 10 cents. I think that the EPR stands in the gap where citizens fail to stand. I think that EPR is between the packaging industry, and it doesn't really take the consumer into cognizance. I think it's taking the good of the consumer into place, where the consumer can't do that for themselves. So we always say the consumer needs to make their purchasing decision based on their ethics, and their ethics would be, avoid pollution and save the environment. But consumer behavior is far more influenced by price than by these much less tangible metrics like sustainability, especially when you don't really know what the brand means when they say this is an earth-friendly packaging, because of, firstly, that you don't know if they're telling the truth, and even if they are, what does it mean? I think EPR, one of the only real consumer-facing tools from EPR is the environmental labeling, which at this point in South Africa isn't very well controlled, and we're pushing hard to bring that in. But there's no central body that controls, monitors, or enforces that. And so environmental labeling is largely inaccurate. So, consumers, if in that question they were talking about consumers, people as consumers, I would say they're not included. But I would say that people as, let's say, the informal sector, I would say that they are being included, and that the EPR is giving them a seat at the table and giving them an opportunity to participate. So, I'm just going to leave it there.
I think, Oliver, your 10 cents worth was more than 10 cents. I really think that, consumers need not know what EPR is and all of that. They need to know what they need to know. And I don't think anyone has done a voice of customer survey to find out, hey, what do you need to know from regarding packaging? And most often it's about, source segregation, right? If they do that right, and if that's enforced, that's a big help to recycling. All right, we have another question.
Sorry,
This
can I jump in there? What I failed to say was, if EPR is doing its job correctly, then the intention of EPR would be reflected in the pricing of the products. So
right.
That should really be the result here, is the customer can see by the price which is the better choice for the environment as well. Thank you.
Totally agree. And I think, consumer involvement, etc., can be the subject of another webinar, and we can talk about that in quite detail. There's another question we have from Rajesh Srivastav. This is targeted at Rahul. What's your view on ESG framework currently being deployed by Indian conglomerates and the BRSR, etc.? Do they help EPR recycling, environmental protection against plastic pollution?
Still too early to say, I would say. I think because the BRSR is very recently that has been introduced, and within the ESG and BRSR reporting, plastics is a very small component in terms of the larger sustainability angle when you're looking at reporting for BRSR and ESG. So I think it's we're not seeing that the BRSR reporting are either directly or indirectly impacting implementation of EPR or the other way around. At least that
Yeah.
I haven't seen that happen on ground. But independently, if the companies are actually going out and implementing their EPR obligations, you will see them scoring better on their ESG and BRSR reporting as well, because that's one component of the reporting that you need to do for your ESG and BRSR. So I would say it's still early to say that in terms of if it's actually is it a good thing or a bad thing. But yeah, at this stage, not much that we can identify.
Okay. Thanks for that, Rahul. There are two questions which I'm trying to combine in one question. There's a question from Kirtana that says, there was a lot of talk about inadequate coordination, let's say, between Central Pollution Control and State Pollution Control Board. What's being done to address that? And the second one was, what kind of research, stakeholder consultation, and market analysis typically precede the formulation of amendment of a regulation? Be curious, Oliver, to get your thoughts on that second part of the question. And Sebastian, since you are in the process of implementing this in UAE, and I heard you say that there's extensive stakeholder consultation, maybe your comments as well. Are
Shall
you
I go
there,
first?
Sebastian? Yeah, please go ahead,
Sebastian,
Oliver.
I can wait. Shame, is he
Sebastian,
here?
Sebastian is at this moment like God. He's present, though we can't see him. Go ahead, Oliver.
All right.
Yeah.
Remind me the question. It was about
So
research
what
before.
kind of, yeah,
Okay,
before
remember.
the amendment to a regulation, yeah.
We have quite a rigorous process that has to be followed to make regulations in South Africa. There's a lot of stakeholder engagement, commenting periods, amendments, etc., which is why the initial process to get our EPR regulations in place was a little bit messy. So there were amendments pretty much as soon as it was published, and now, not even 5 years later, we're doing amendments again. So I think the government has to follow a rigorous process, and I think a lot of the process is just checkbox exercising. Have they left an amount of time for comments? Have they included the comments? Whether or not your comments are actually taken into consideration and whether or not it's implemented is perhaps not as clear. But we do have a very good state-owned research entity in South Africa, the Center for Scientific and Industrial Research, and they have a very dedicated department for this kind of work. So they were running a national plastics action program, and they do a lot of the roadmap work and research papers that feed into this. So I think they're very heavily involved, the scientific community, in the creation of these regulations. And then I think as a stakeholder in the regulations, you don't really have as much of a voice unless you combine with your relevant industry association. So SAPRO is the representative body for the plastic recycling industry, and we speak then on behalf of the plastic recyclers to the regulatory body and try to use the weight of all of the recyclers to affect the way that the regulations will be amended. But it's also quite slow moving, so I think they've given themselves a year or more to make those amendments. So we shall see what the next amendments bring.
One of the things we see in India is that the recyclers are now beginning to sort of separate from the, big plastic consumers. So, for example, the big plastic consumers, like bigger plastic associations and are forming their own associations so that their voices can be heard across the policymakers. Rahul, do you like to comment on the state pollution control board officers or the people in, I'm not wanting to point fingers, but at the implementation side, there could be gaps and what's being done about it? I think this question was more from the perspective of raising awareness, educating the implementers about the law, given that plastic waste rules is relatively new, in the scheme of regulations.
No, I think I kind of agree on that fact because we've seen this in our own challenges in our own way that while there are policies that get written at the central level, often, and this is I think not just about plastics but even other policies for that matter of fact, that they don't trickle down to the state level and to the implementers where they are not really fully aware about what the changes are or how to go about implementation. So these challenges do, I think, still exist, and I feel that Shailendraji, in the role that you play in this entire ecosystem, maybe you will have some idea in terms of how the government is working and trying to work towards making sure that there's ease in terms of implementation of this and the communication is being followed across the entire spectrum.
Yeah, very brief comments there. I know that they have reached out to organizations like CIPET to train their officials on understanding plastics, plastic processing, and so on. Many associations have offered them their services of educating the officers about the plastic industry, and so various efforts being taken. But yeah, it's a little bit slower than what we would have anticipated. Okay, do we have time for more questions? There are two, three more questions, Alia, but do we have time?
Sure, Shailendraji, please carry on.
Okay, so let me come back to a question raised by, uh, if I hope I'm pronouncing his name correctly, it's Ray Kabal. How can we effectively promote and encourage staff in healthcare facility to be more focused and involved in plastic recycling, especially when policies and materials are already in place, but there's noticeable lack of engagement and interest. Now, I presume when he says healthcare, this is things like hospitals and others, which has got more to do with biomedical waste than possibly pure plastics. But plastic packages are huge, even at anyone wants to take that question? Or?
I seem to be
Okay,
losing out
so
on
that's a
Shailendraji. I'm not
that's a
sure
good.
if it's just me. Yeah, that's you with you as well, Oliver. Shailendraji,
Oh,
your internet seems to be
can
a
you
bit.
can you hear me? Ah, okay. I'm so sorry about that. I didn't realize I was the culprit. Can you hear me now?
We can hear you now. Yes,
Can you hear
yes,
me now? Okay. All right.
yes.
Out of precaution, I had connected this to my iPhone because if there's a power outage, then I get totally disconnected. But my iPhone continues to work. So that's possibly why you're getting a little disturbance. But did you get the last question on healthcare facility and what can be done to promote plastic recycling or proper handling in the healthcare facility? Any specific comments on that? Or I know that there are biomedical waste disposal. Yes, Oliver, you wanted to answer that?
Firstly, I can't comment on that one. I
You have
think
raised
that
your
might be
hand,
for
Oliver.
Rahul. But I would like to ask it. I would
Okay.
like to ask a question to you and to Rahul.
Yeah. Yeah.
How are the
Sure.
Trump tariffs
Please go ahead.
influencing the plastics industry in India?
Whoa. I was wondering when that name would come up. But Rahul, you want to take a shot at that? I have my own views on it, which I'll be happy to share.
I mean, I think if I had to give it in one single sentence, I think it's just bringing in a lot more uncertainty. Uh, so the plans that people have made in terms of, maybe India also exports a lot of recycled content out of the country. So I think those plans are right now quite uncertain and they are changing every day, week, month. So still not sure in terms of how they're going to play in terms of the larger aspect of things. But at this stage, I think that it is to proceed with caution and not rely on the entire, not rely your business on exports, at least from that point of view.
Yeah, my short comment on that is the Trump tariffs have come into play a couple of days ago. The industry is figuring out, particularly like Rahul mentioned, also the recyclate manufacturers, etc., as to what impact it has on their segment, on their particular sector. But aside of that, Trump walked out of the Paris Agreement 4 years ago. He's walked out of it again, despite which the UNEP Plastic Treaty meeting continues to happen. There are a lot of countries who feel that no matter what Trump says, the impact of climate change is now visible, right? You're getting droughts and rainfalls and flooding and so on. Um, from that perspective, it does manage to chug along, though I see a little bit of slowing down in Europe on sustainability with the recent thing about diluting the CSRD rules and so on. More importantly, I think global brand owners have seemed to have put a pause button with Unilever's, Coca-Cola, and others reducing their targets on plastics in particular. So I'm not sure whether Trump was the cause for that or not, but he makes things interesting. Coming back to the questions we had, sorry, we had two more questions which I'll quickly take. The first question is from Cyrus AG. What efforts will you make to help us in Africa, Nigeria? And I think this is a question for Oliver. Help us in Africa spread the information of plastic waste and recycling in a more wider way, because only few places in my country that know about this. Did you get the question?
Shailendra, you're breaking up a little bit. Could you try again?
Okay, sorry about that. Can you hear me now? Have I been cut off? Sorry, I think I lost the connection. Alia, could you play the question thread again? I've lost the question in my question box. But
Shailendra?
essentially, Oliver, it was Silas asking, how can you help them in Nigeria, um, you know, promote awareness about plastic waste regulations?
Thank you. And yes, I see that Swalia also sent it in the chat now, so thank you.
Yeah.
It's a really tough question to ask because that's outside of our scope of influence and focus. But I can say that we do some international trade in plastics for recycling. South Africa has a very well-established recycling economy, and we receive recyclable materials from neighboring countries, mostly sub-Saharan Africa. I'm not sure how far up. I would be very surprised if material from Nigeria reaches us in South Africa. We also have very specific design for recycling guidelines that focus on South Africa's ability to recycle something. So we would first check if it can be recycled in South Africa, and then we would call it recyclable or not. So a lot of products, like fast-moving consumer good products, do travel into Africa from South Africa, but the design for recycling, again, is focused on what can be recycled in South Africa. That's how the OPRLs are applied. So spreading information about plastic waste recycling, I would assume, means consumer information, and SAPRO doesn't really participate in the consumer information other than the on-pack recycling labels. So If you are in Nigeria and you are in need of some help in terms of setting up a recycling business, or you need some market intelligence, or you need some how-to guides, the SAPRO website has got some of that. So please go and have a look and see if you can find something there that might answer your question more specifically. I hope that's
Super.
helpful.
Super. Thanks for that. One quick question for both of you. Oliver, starting with you. There's a question from Mohammed Lairi that says, with all these pressures coming from various plastic treaties, there's likely to be ban on single-use plastics and ban on several plastic items. And where do you see, therefore, in that ban scenario, a role for compostable products or compostable polymers, particularly that can be home composted and such? Do you see a role of that in South Africa or in the larger African continent? And maybe Rahul, you can comment later on that.
There is a role for compostable, biodegradable products. I think we just need to be very careful about the application of this material. So it shouldn't go into products that are widely recycled already, because they have the ability to upend the recycling industry. So if you put compostable materials into the recycling stream, you would then contaminate and ruin the recycling process. So it has the potential to do a lot of damage. But as you said, there are some items which might get banned or phased out, like papers or straws, or the sucker sticks and things like that. And I think in those instances, that's a very good application for biodegradable materials. So the decision about applying the biodegradable materials must be made quite carefully, and I think there's a lot of stakeholders who should be involved in that decision. If the brand is the only one making the decision about biodegradable packaging, they might not take into consideration the impact it's having on the recycling industry. So effectively, by good intention, they might be poisoning their own solution providers with biodegradable material. So it needs to be very, very clearly defined, and it also needs to be cautiously applied. But yes, and the other thing that's important is standards and certification in compostability. I think that it's quite a diverse material group, and some of it is genuinely compostable at home, and some of it is not really. So it almost has a bigger greenwashing potential than plastics. So we need to be extra cautious. But yes, there are instances.
Right. Thanks, Oliver. Rahul, in the Indian context, would you like to comment on that?
Yeah, sure. I mean, my personal view is that I don't think banning plastics is the solution, because it often leads to more challenges. I think Oliver slightly touched upon it as well. So I think definitely for where there are substitutes, we should look at substitutes for plastics. But this entire compostable, biodegradable, oxo-biodegradable, and multiple other universe of compostable material that is coming in the market is often leading to more challenges than solutions, because most of them are not biocompostable in your home setup. They require industrial composting settings, and brands often use this for for greenwashing in that sense. And often what happens is that since there is no supply chain, there's no infrastructure to actually manage it as an industrial setup. It's going into the existing plastic supply chain, and actually spoiling the feedstock for the plastic recyclers in this ecosystem as well. And often because does not have infrastructure for industrial composting, and we've tried this at our own end, and you will not see most of them compost directly in your compost bins in your backyard or at your home. And for the matter of fact, India does not even have backyards and composting setups. So while yes, I think that substituting products for which are better in terms of environment is a good thought process, but I don't think compostable or biodegradable is the solution for replacement of plastics.
Super. So I think I'd like to end our discussion now. I must thank all the panelists for a very rich discussion in a very short span of an hour to unpack this complex world of regulations, emerging markets, market realities, and so on. Has always been challenging, but I think we did a fairly good job of touching on the principles of circular economy and sustainability, diving down to some of the complexities in the evolving regulations, and also challenges in emerging markets, particularly dealing with clients and trying to address some of the gaps that exist in the policy today and the regulations today. I'd like to sum it up by saying the challenges are huge. We sometimes seem to think, we are taking two steps forward and one step back. But if I see it over a period of last 10 years, I tend to agree with Sebastian and what he said that we have made progress. There is still a long way to go, and regulations will evolve. That's the nature of regulations. And I think industries will adapt because that's the nature of industry. And at that equilibrium point, things will really begin to shoot up, and one can see dramatic changes on the ground. So, once again, a very big thank you to all the panelists who brought in their various perspectives from literally around the world. With that, I'd like to hand over the floor to Swaliha to take it forward. Swaliha, you're on mute. You're on mute, Swaliha.
Sorry about that. Sorry about that.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Shailendra Singh, for moderating so effectively. It was a great session, a very informative one for all, I'm sure. Big thank you to all our speakers, Oliver, Rahul, and Sebastian, for taking the time out to be here for this webinar and sharing all your views and thoughts. Before we say goodbye, we'd like to remind you all once again that the Plastics Recycling Show is not far away. And those of you who might be interested in joining the show as exhibitors still have a chance to book your space at the show. As already mentioned at the start of the webinar, the brochure and other material is available right here in the materials section of this platform, so you can download the same. If you would like more information or to book your stand, you can also get in touch with Purna Sri Shetty. Her contact details are displayed on the slide. As for those who would like to visit the show, the registrations are now open. We would like to invite you to make use of this opportunity to connect and network with the best in the industry. So you can scan the QR code on the slide and you can also register directly from our website. We look forward to seeing you all at the Plastics Recycling Show this September. Thank you.